Good morning, kids. Today I'm in East London, St. Olaf's Church, St. Olaf the Great's Church. Well, I had initially planned this week to do a fun Canada Day story, but it's just not appropriate to do right now when we look at everything through the lens of what's happening with Canada's Indigenous people, residential schools, all of those conversations. So instead I sat down and I did a little bit of research to tell you a story that, even though it's 500 or so years old, it's still extremely pertinent to today. We're going to talk about some of the First Nations people, the first Indigenous people from Canada that were brought here. And by brought, I mean kidnapped. And our story starts with Martin Frobisher. You might know him as the namesake of Frobisher Bay in Canada, and Frobisher, Saskatchewan, and many other place names and buildings in Canada that are named after Martin Frobisher. Frobisher essentially was a guy who consistently failed upwards and somehow managed to gain the favor of Queen Elizabeth, who basically gave her endorsement for him to go out and look for the Northwest Passage, the mythical Northwest Passage that would allow British trading vessels to travel to China and come back laden with spice and tea. What he found was Baffin Island, or what he came across was Baffin Island. Instead, he made 3 trips there, and quite honestly, they were all relative failures. He lost 5 of his men, who were ordered not to go and have any contact with the Inuit people when they went ashore, but they did anyways, and apparently were taken captive by the Inuits. The Inuits tell a different story in that the men lived peacefully among them for many, many years and died sailing back to England on the boat that they tried to make themselves. But Frobisher wanted to get his insubordinate men back, and he thought the best way to do that is to take some hostages, help them do a little bit of communicating, or at least have a few bargaining chips to get his men back. Sadly, that wound up never happening. Frobisher took captive a man, a woman, and the woman's baby. Now, they were not a couple, they were not a family. It was taken in 2 separate incidents. They never found their insubordinate men, so they set sail back to England with their 3 captives instead. And I guess the idea was to get them to learn how to speak English and have them serve as guides for future expeditions back to Baffin Island, back to Nutaaq, back to this area, to help them find more riches and more gold. Turns out the riches that his hull was laden with, by the way, was worthless iron ore. That's a story for another day, but absolutely no gold there, and all the missions were a complete failure. But I digress, because this story is about the 3 people from what is now Canada, the Inuit people that were taken to England. Kalicho, who is the man, Arnaq, who is the woman, and the baby Nutaaq. And I'm just doing my best to try to get those pronunciations of the names right, which basically just mean man, woman, and child in the Inuit language, or the Inuit language of the time. They were brought in and observed kind of like you would observe an animal, or they would have observed something like that. They were sketched, they were poked and prodded by doctors, and Kalicho was forced to perform an exhibition of his kayaking and spearfishing skills on the Avon River in Bristol, which is where they initially landed. And the Lord Mayor of Bristol and all of the high society came out to see this man's incredible skill in the water. So Kalicho had broke 2 ribs in the skirmish in which he was taken prisoner and kidnapped. So needless to say, he wasn't feeling too good about what he had to do. When you have 2 broken ribs, you don't breathe too well. And unfortunately, as a result of that, Kalicho got pneumonia and he passed away. And not long after that, Arnaq passed away as well, which was thought to be of the measles. They were both buried as heathens in unmarked graves at a church in Bristol, and they're on the church record there. Frobisher's kind of choked about this, that the people that he brought back had passed away before he had a chance to show them off to Queen Elizabeth, but the baby was still there. So plans were made to bring this child to London to present it to Queen Elizabeth, to say, look at the people that we have discovered, look at this, and please give me more money to continue going out and doing the same. But sadly, the baby Nutaaq also passed away. And that's why I'm at St. Olaf's Church, because it was in this churchyard that baby was buried, with no marker, no grave, and I don't even know if there's a mention of it within the church registry at all. But somewhere in amongst all of this concrete and steel, which was a much larger churchyard, the baby has its final resting place. When we look at history through a lens, sometimes it's really easy to say that's the way things were at the time. But when we think about children and we think about unmarked graves, the conversations that we're having in Canada right now, can we really say that?